Perfect. So thank you everyone for coming. Thank you for those that have shared where they are from. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to record this presentation, this webinar for social media purposes afterwards. Um, just to introduce myself really quickly, I'm Erica, and also here with me is Clara.
Hello, everyone.
We work for Europe Language Jobs. Thank you guys for participating. We would also like to give a big thanks to our sponsors, Fujitsu Portugal and Saito Portugal, for making this event possible. And today we're very thankful for Evelina for coming in and speaking with us and sharing her knowledge. She is an 8-year professional career coach, a job search strategist, and a personal branding expert, always focusing on international students, which is exactly our audience. So thank you so much, Evelina, for coming. I'll pass the word to you.
Well, hello, everybody. And well, thank you so much for having me here. And today we're going to be talking about how to succeed in online interviews, right? So just let me share my screen with you, and then we can actually start the presentation, and I will talk what to expect, what we're going to discuss today, a little bit self-introduction. And also, if you stay until the end, we have some special surprise for you as well. Now, this is not that special surprise. This is just a little bit of the kind of housekeeping. I think that, Clara is about to drop a link for actually downloading a company research notes worksheet. You can do it now, and that's going to be something good for you to have it and then follow it once we're going to talk how to prepare for interviews and how to research a company, and keep it for your future interview preparations. This is the my ultimate preparation sheet that I'm using with my clients and advise everybody to have it. But I will talk it through more during the presentation. I just wanted you guys to have it now, probably before we go into that. It makes your life easier. But by having said that, you can always download that a bit later as well. That's absolutely fine. So, okay, let me share my screen. And if you guys can't see it, just let me know, because I think once I'm going to press present, I'm not really going to be able to see anybody or see the chat.
Yes, we're able to see.
Okay, I'm just kind of trying to press present. Some reason is kind of taking a while to think, but I think we are coming there. Slowly but surely. Yeah, I think we're there. Okay. Hey, great, fantastic. So, as you probably know, everybody registered here with a top goal in their mind and wanting to learn today top strategies to succeed in online interviews. So, what exactly we are going to be talking today? So, I'm going to really talk today and introduce the concepts of how to prepare for online interviews. We're going to talk about the key mistakes that everybody is making when it comes to preparation. We will talk about digital body language, and then we are of course going to have time to discuss a few the most difficult yet the most popular interview questions. So to start with, I actually would like to introduce myself. Erica was very kind to talk a little bit about me. And yes, I am a career coach, job search strategist, and personal branding expert. I've been a coach for last 8 years. And I specialize working with graduates, and especially international graduates who either want to secure a job in UK. I'm currently based in UK, London, or want to find a job in other European countries, in Asia, US, any other regions. And in the last 8 years, I have successfully helped hundreds of students to secure graduate and internship positions within top international companies. Now, a little bit more about my story, how I actually started career coaching. even though I teach everybody to sort of be, kind of start a career in and follow your dream, to become a career coach, I have to admit, wasn't my dream. And career coaching happened to my life rather than I sort of, was planning this since I was in university. I'm like, I don't know whether you're graduating now, but if you are, I was in a very similar situation that you are guys now finding yourself. I graduated just after 2008 recession. I studied politics and international relations, and all my studies were preparing me to become a diplomat. However, because the recession hit, the recruitment of diplomats was paused, and I have to admit I had no plan B, and I absolutely had no idea what I'm going to do with my degree and with my professional career. So I moved to London, and I started my career in marketing, and I was working with education company and was sort of overlooking that promotion. I didn't like my first job, and it wasn't necessarily about the job, but more about the company that I chose. That's why now I'm feeling so passionate about helping people to really find the right career moves and the right career choices and find the right companies, because that satisfaction of the job is so important. Throughout all my sort of professional career, I looked for a job successfully in 4 different foreign countries, naming UK, China, Sweden, and Norway. I sort of, haven't mentioned, but after my sort of graduation, I also spent 1 year in China studying and working there, and then moved back to London. And the first career choice that change that I've done after I was really dissatisfied with my job was to actually move into consulting and recruitment. And I spent 2 years assisting financial and professional services to find and recruit top talents. And this is where my knowledge comes in terms of understanding how companies select people for the interviews, what they actually want to hear in the actual interviews. And as a sort of being really, this experience really helped me to develop my sort of career coaching knowledge. And while I was helping to sort of recruit top talents, I started getting a little bit more into coaching, because I was preparing people for interviews. I wanted to make sure that the people I recommend actually get the jobs. So this is how I transitioned into career coaching. And my actual sort of career coaching journey started in one of the top career coaching firms here in London for international students. And when I started working there 8 years ago, the company was very small. And as working for any startup, it was a really fantastic opportunity to grow with a company. And I was able to get involved in so many different aspects of coaching. I not only coached students and was helping them to develop their interview skills and sort of, prepare CVs, cover letters, and etc. But I also started creating career coaching programs for the company. I helped the company to expand regionally and internationally to US, and I coached their coaches, sort of help them to systemize the processes of career coaching itself. And then 3 years ago, I decided that actually I want to start my own business, and I started my own career coaching consultancy. And that's why we are sort of talking today. And during that, my experience working the sort of, in recruitment and also working for a top career coaching company, I actually developed my Get Noticed and Hired Fast system, which basically involves key 5 elements which everybody should have in order to get a job offer. And that's what my coaching actually focuses a lot. First of all, if you want to get a job, you really need to know where you're going. It's almost like if you don't have a clear career direction, it's almost like you are sort of driving a car without GPS. The next step is always to, of course, understand recruitment process, because what I'm seeing from a lot of my clients, and one of the reasons why people are failing, that they really don't understand how companies are assessing them. And that's what we're going to talk today in interviews as well, how important it is to actually know what the question means, why it's being asked, because that helps you to prepare the right answers, the right documents, and tick the boxes. And that's a sort of, through practice, we're developing job search skills. But the sort of area which I'm particularly proud of is actually I included personal branding in my coaching system, because I believe it's not enough nowadays to really demonstrate that you are the right candidate for the job. You really need to be better than everybody else. And how you're going to do so if you don't know what your star or wow factor is, right? So that's a sort of what I'm focusing a lot as well, that it's not only that you match the requirements, but you also find something unique about you, something that you can stand out with. And that's something that sort of adds value to the company. And that's what it really leads to a job offer. So to kind of sum up, my coaching involves discovering career direction, helping to identify individual strengths, and assisting them to communicate the value to the company. And as I work with a lot of students, that's especially important if they don't have any experience, how to find the skills from internships, academics, from extracurricular activities, even personal life, to make sure that you can highlight the relevant skills on your CV. As I said, I also work a lot in creating personal brand. I help to create accomplishment and strength-based CV. I teach how to write targeted and very specific cover letters. And I work a lot of developing people's interview skills and helping them to prepare for assessment centers. So today we're going to be focusing on that one particular area of my coaching is interview skills development. And we are going to talk about online interviews because, well, everyone is having them, right? And I mean, nobody's going to be surprised to hear that online interviews are actually going to stay. And of course, we are sort of in pandemic, and different countries handling that in different ways. One, countries are more successful in moving back to working in the offices. However, even here in UK, I can tell you that at the moment, there are pretty much no face-to-face interviews happening. And even before the pandemic, because I've been a career coach now for 8 years, I can really tell you the sort of the journey, how we moved away from that face-to-face interaction. The first sort of move was to have telephone interviews. But even 2 years before the pandemic, most of the international companies, the first round interviews would be pre-recorded digital online interviews, because even, the sort of having no restrictions at place, companies found online interviews much easier to carry out. It saves a lot of resources, human power. So online interviews are here to stay. And there are certain slightly different aspects that you need to know when you're preparing for them. Just to sort of clarify, when we talk about online interviews, there are two main types. Pre-recorded video interviews. So that's something that I sort of referred about pre-pandemic kind of international companies hiring system that, I don't know, maybe some of you already experienced that already, that companies send you a link. You have, let's say, 48 hours or 5 working days to complete your interviews. So you can decide when it works for you. You click on the link, then you sort of have, let's say, 2 or 3 minutes to prepare, then 2 or 3 minutes to answer the question. You sit, look at the camera, record your answers, press submit, and then the sort of company decides screening them and sort of, see whether you pass the criteria. So, that's one type. And there is another type, which is, of course, live on screen interviews, like something, well, we are having a webinar here, but, we could sort of have one-to-one chat on Zoom, Skype, and that's a sort of is a little bit more similar to what you actually get, you are used to if you had any one-to-one interviews, because it actually allows people to have the actual live interaction, and you don't really feel that you are just talking to a screen who is like, nobody's responding to you. And these are sort of recorded video interviews could be quite daunting. I always make joke with with my own clients that I say, well, if you are really good at Snapchat or TikTok or sort of Instagram lives, then you probably don't have a really sort of big issue looking at the screen and recording yourself. But most people actually find this experience quite daunting, and that's why it requires some particular extra preparation for that, to make sure that you know what you're saying, that you also sound confident and you convey the right message. Now, all the tips that I'm going to be talking about can actually use to both type of online interviews. So that's just sort of, something to keep in mind. So I want to start straight away with the sort of main mistakes that everybody's making when preparing for online interviews. And the first one is probably very generic, very obvious. However, a lot of people are making this mistake, right? It's not finding a suitable location. It is especially the sort of when it comes to kind of recording your answers on pre-recorded digital interviews. People might leave this until the last minute. They sort of don't, also being online doesn't give the same sort of formal structure. So therefore the people think anywhere we can do it, in the car, in a sort of any corner, but you really need to be strategic, and you really need to think about where you're going to be recording your interview or where you're going to be having it, right? And the sort of, I think talking about background noise and distractions, that's a very obvious point. However, I'm sure, many of you've seen videos of people being interviewed on BBC or any sort of and other news channels, and you would have sort of somebody talking, and then the kids would running into the sort of in the room, or a cat will jump on you. There's all sort of different funny distractions happening, and while it's really funny to look at it and laugh on YouTube, I don't think that this is something that you would like to happen for you during an interview. And some HR people, sort of might be a bit more forgiving than others, but that's a sort of going to reflect poorly on you, that you don't plan well enough, that you also don't take this interview opportunity seriously enough. But the sort of the biggest mistake that I've seen, what people are making is actually not thinking about lighting and hoping that having the sort of, the main light, or that the sort of the room itself is going to be bright enough. The sort of one thing that I really want to share with you is that it's really a good idea to actually have light in front of you. So either you sit in front of a sort of window, or if it's dark, you can just have a light facing, sort of into your face. And that's what really makes a huge difference. It's a very tiny, simple thing to actually do. So I really would recommend you to think about this when you are preparing for your next interview, and kind of position yourself in the right way. Also, there's now all the programs are introducing different backgrounds that you can use. You can sort of have that, you are in the beach, you are in mountains. And this is something I would really personally say that you need to be very careful when you are using these virtual backgrounds. They might look very pretty, but because of the sort of technical glitches or internet sort of being slow, you could actually see it's really buffering. And again, it doesn't really going to reflect well on you. So this is sort of the ultimate best setup that you sort of want to have. Also kind of positioning your camera a little bit higher up, and that's a sort of going to make you look better. It's also going to help other people to see you better, and that's a sort of going to really help you to sort of get a message across. Now, moving on to the sort of mistake number 2 is forgetting about body language. And this is something that not a lot of people are talking yet, because even though more and more companies were introducing video interviews, this is not something that people particularly enjoy. It's still relatively quite a new sort of area. And if you think, right, if you have a face-to-face meeting, you can have a really strong sort of handshake that everybody's keep talking about, having an eye contact, the sort of different walk, and that really kind of covers all the body language that you need to do. But what you're going to be doing when you can't really shake anybody's hands when you are online, right? So I want to talk about this digital body language and the sort of things that you really need to keep in mind when you are having an interview, because it is a really danger now, because we're not really seeing people. So in a sense, we kind of feel a little bit more relaxed, and it also, we are in our sort of home. It makes us a little bit more comfortable, which is really good because it adds more confidence. But also we can't relax too much because it's still a very formal interview process, and you really need to come across as a professional, right? So let's just sort of talk about the first thing is eye contact, right? And eye contact in a virtual online interviews are going to be the sort of considered or being equal virtual handshakes. And, if we are really going to pick a few sort of key things, the eye contact and maintaining eye contact is going to be one of the most important things that you can do during a virtual interview. Especially, kind of keeping an eye contact could be quite daunting for some people, because they do like looking at themselves in the sort of, corner camera, and that's what makes them feel sort of more confident, more secure. But in that sort of way, it shows that you are looking at somewhere else, not directly at the person. So you need to really, kind of either place your own camera where you sort of your kind of camera eye is, and then you always look at yourself and the camera, or just really need to sort of train and get used to looking just only directly at the camera, and that's a sort of going to help you to maintain that eye contact with a person who you are going to be talking to. Now, facial expressions, right? It's really, the same kind of rule comes that you need to really look interested, focused. And again, it's sort of much easier to really show your enthusiasm and interest when you are seeing another person. But when you are online, sort of a lot of people take that step back and they relax too much. So you really need to be engaging, smiling, nodding when appropriate, and really sort of demonstrating with your eyes and your face that you're focusing and you're listening to what other person is saying. Because I don't know how many sort of interviews and interactions online you had, but there are people who just are looking at the camera or talking, and they just kind of scrolling through internet and doing their own things, right? And that's a sort of what creates that kind of really blank expression. And the other person who is talking to you might not really be sure, okay, are you even listening? Are you interested? So you really need to be fully focused and really sort of kind of generate that enthusiasm and show that you're really interested in what other person needs, is telling you. And now the sort of, kind of posture, right? If you're at home, it can be very tempting to be slouchy, sort of sitting too far back, or the sort of, like kind of be on the bed or on the floor. We all sort of go for comfort, right? But again, as I keep sort of saying, view this online interview in a sort of the same seriousness as you would view your any face-to-face interview. So you really need to be straight sitting. The best idea to sort of find a desk chair or anything where you can actually really sit straight and look at the person who you're talking to. Now, the sort of kind of one trick, and sort of also the same mistake that people might sort of make, that naturally when we are interacting with people one-to-one, right, we will usually sort of, when we find something more interesting or kind of want to hear a little bit more, we always lean in, right? And that's a sort of something that we can do while we sort of are on digital interview as well. And that's a sort of would be a good body language to use, that you are listening, reacting to people, but also you don't want to roll too much. And what I mean, like, if you're going to leaning like this, it's just going to be, only one, like, let's say big nose or forehead or whatever you're going to be focused on your camera. And that's a sort of a big nose. So usually the sort of the kind of distance from the camera, a good rule is that if you have kind of the sort of arm's length, something like that, that's the sort of positions you not too far, not too close, and that's a sort of really the best distance to have when you are having these online interviews. Now, the next thing, which is going to be really important, is your tone of voice, right? And this is a sort of, some people get really nervous, their voice starts sort of shaking, they don't know really what to do. There's very little body language that you can use except of eye contact and your voice. So you need to really sound convincing. You really need to sound confident, and you need to have a steady tone of voice. There's sort of a few things and tricks how to deal with the nerves when you are sort of talking with another person. That if you are a person who gets nervous when people ask you a question or the sort of, interviews, and it's absolutely normal to feel a little bit stressed during interviews, it's a good idea to have a glass of water, so that if you really sort of, getting a bit nervous and you feel like your voice is a bit shaking, just take a sip of water, a little bit relaxed, and that's a sort of, really going to put you a little bit more on the confidence side. Also, the sort of one of the sort of other tricks is, of course, practicing, right? And I always say this to everybody who I work with, and sort of, any candidates who I sort of, just talk or get in touch. And I'm going to tell you this, as well, that practice makes it perfect, and interviews are just like any other skills that can be developed. And nobody is really performing extremely well in the first ever interview. And the only way how you can get more confident and kind of adapt these tricks is just by practicing. And that's why sort of, other people choose to work with a career coach, or they look for mentors' help or friends' help, family members. So that sort of, look at any preparation and any performance in online interviews as a practice, right? That's a sort of, you will develop through time, and don't feel extremely bad if the first few ones were kind of a disaster, especially, you learn from mistakes, you move on, and you get better. The sort of other thing, which is a funny one, is like what you wear now when you are going to be having an online interview, right? Nobody can really see you except of like what the sort of, this inch from whatever the sort of, part of from your kind of chin, right? So kind of, people get into this really, again, comfortable sort of mode that it doesn't matter too much, right? People are at home, and especially now during pandemic, other persons also working from home. But no, I can't emphasize enough, and I've seen everything, trust me. You have to take this as seriously as you would be taking a face-to-face interview. And that means actually putting a professional outfit on. And now when I say a professional outfit, what some people do that they put only top on, and they sort of completely forget about the bottoms, and they either wear sort of no pants at all, or wear some sort of, funny pants or whatever. And you might sort of think, yes, nobody can sort of, see you, but there's like a mistake of doing that. And there are sort of two reasons. First of all, if we're talking about confidence, you actually having a full professional outfit is going to make you sound more professional, behave more professional, and also have a completely different professional body language. So it's kind of almost like setting up in the role, right? When you have in theater people putting, the makeup, costumes, the same thing, goes for interviews. You're going into that sort of, really relaxing mode, especially nowadays when everybody's working from home. We need to kind of separate, one role from another. So putting that outfit would really help you. And also, you really don't know, and I'm talking from my own personal experience, that it did happen to me, and I've seen other people sort of experience that as well, that you don't know what's going to happen. It could, let's say you have water, the water will will splash, you will have to jump. I don't know if you have any pets, the cat can jump on you, and then you need to straight away jump in. Or you have a postman coming and knocking on your door, and you need to leave a laptop. So if you're not wearing any pants, or if you're wearing any funny pants with your, let's say, kind of suit, that's just sort of going to be a really embarrassing and uncomfortable situation to be in. And as some people might be more forgiving than others. However, the stress that you're going to have on yourself, and the way how you're going to completely be put out of the sort of sync in your interviews, is going to be really a massive problem. So in order to kind of avoid all this, I really recommend you not to sort of put on a full professional attire, and everything what you're sort of going to be preparing for face-to-face interview, treat it in the same way for online interviews as well. So what I kind of want to focus a lot today, and that's a sort of the key preparation for me. We talked about the details that you need to sort of keep in mind, but actually, the biggest mistake of all the other ones, which can be easily fixed, is the lack of preparation. And everybody knows that preparing for an interview is extremely important. And I don't have the sort of chance to ask you all now, but you might tell me that, well, actually preparing for an interview is, of course, it's obvious, of course we do that, but preparation means very different things to different people. And I kind of want to focus a lot today on how to prepare for an interview in the right way, how to prepare for an interview in the most effective way that will actually, use the least amount of time that you need to spend, but also at the same time give you the biggest results. And the sort of the first thing that I really want to talk is about how to research company. because that's a sort of one of the essential parts with a lot of people are failing. And also when it comes to the sort of researching company, it also leads to not very well formed interview answers. And that's a sort of the first thing when when you start your application, especially when you're preparing for interviews, is researching a company. And I can't emphasize enough how important it is to do so. And a lot of people, when it comes to sort of researching, and a lot of my clients come to me and say, well, but what should I look at? You go on the website, everybody's talking about the same information. You go on a few news, like, what should I be checking? There's so much information online, which can be really overwhelming. So that's why you really need to be selective. And this is why I prepared, and I'm sharing this company research checklist worksheet with you guys. So, these are the exact steps that I ask my clients to use. And that's a sort of, the exact steps that I developed through my 8 years experience. And there is a link in the sort of chat. And sort of, I hope that you can sort of maybe drop at that link again if if we have a lot of sort of conversation going on. But I really would strongly suggest you to download that and really keep it as a memo, as a checklist for any interview that you're going to be having. And let me sort of explain a little bit what how to research a company, what sort of are the key elements that you really need to be looking at, right? Because as I said before, there's so much overwhelm you with all the sort of vast information that you find online that it's very easy to get distracted, and it's very easy not to really pay attention to the important things and focus too much on the things that nobody's going to be really asking you about that, right? So when it comes to the research, there is this sort of Pareto principle that can be used in many different sort of areas of life, but it also works very beautifully with a company research that I want to use, I would suggest you to use. So what I mean, with that Pareto principle, that basically that 80% of your results come from 20% of your inputs. So there's these two key questions when every time when you are looking for, information about the company, you need to ask yourself, is this information relevant? And is there a possibility that the interviewer will ask me about it? And this is kind of like these two questions, like almost like, kind of a reminder that if you answer no to both of these questions, then this information you shouldn't really waste any time on and move on and find the sort of different things about the company. Right? So, that's sort of very good test. Is this information relevant? And is there a possibility that the interviewer will ask me about it? And now I sort of, being a coach for so long, I kind of really know what are the key areas that you should know, and not necessarily that you might be directly asked this. However, that's sort of going to help you to prepare your motivational questions. It will help you to prepare your further interview questions to ask the interviewer. So I kind of want to talk about these key research areas that I really strongly recommend you always to look at, because that will sort of really guarantee you that you prepared well for an interview. So first of all, you need to sort of think of how does a company make money? And that you will be surprised how many people are going for interviews and they really don't know what sort of business model company is using. Are they service providers or do they sell products? Right? How the sort of, what is the mission? What is the purpose of the company, right? And the most important thing, all that information that you are finding, try to sum up this in your own words, because reading, sort of kind of copying pasting in your sort of hoping that you will remember these answers or that you will understand, it is not really the best strategy. So everything what you read, try to sort of go through your own wording, your own sort of own words to make sure that you fully understand. So that's a sort of one area, how does a company make money? Now, the second area of, kind of key research is who are the company's main customers. So, right, who uses the company's products and services? Are there sort of, different categories, of people? What the sort of age? What is, the sort of, gender? What is the location? If we talk about services, what are the different type of services, and, what different clients are using these different services. Other organizations, other clients are big companies or small ones, which industries they belong to, right? You really need to be sort of fully clear on that, because you need to sort of, what I'm kind of leaning towards here, that you really need to be 100% sure of how company makes money and who they serve and how they serve it, right? If you don't know these basics, you will fail any interview. And even if they don't directly ask you, tell us how we make money, but the code of questions around that sort of area will come up. And one of these sort of questions that we will talk later on is like, why do you want to work for us? If you don't know this key information, you will really struggle to demonstrate your motivation, your commercial awareness, and actually ask very impactful, strong questions in the end of the interview. Now, the sort of other key research area, which actually I have to say very few people do. So if you are already doing this, then I really want to applaud you, and you're really much, sort of having higher chances to succeed than anybody else. When you are doing research about a company, you also need to look at and research the main competitors, right? So you need to know what are the key competitors in the sort of, the same industry. What sort of, same or different products or services they offer. Do they serve the same or different clients? And the sort of the key thing when you are researching different competitors is to actually compare them in your mind, like how they are different, right? Is it, even looking at their sort of, client base, the sort of how long they've been operating, what are different values, what are different missions, right? This is sort of important to really know the difference between the main competitors. And we're sort of very soon we will talk about this, why it's so important to do so. And the last area that you really need to focus on, which again will help you with your motivational questions and answers, it's actually looking at the company's culture and the training opportunities. Sorry, there's a mistake. So in the slide, so if we're talking about company's culture and training opportunities, the things that you need to sort of look at the values, training and support that you're going to be receiving, and also kind of sharing and comparing it with the key players in the industry. The sort of other thing which I missed, and this kind of slides a little bit overlapping, is that also extremely important when you're doing the research about the company is to actually read the news. And you really need to look at the recent press releases. You need to sort of read the reviews, look at the sort of website sort of announcements as well. What are the headlines for this organization? Are they doing well? Are they sort of failing? What are the recent developments? Because that will enormously help you to prepare and demonstrate your commercial awareness. So that's a sort of, if we talk about a key sort of, preparation. Now let's talk about how to prepare your answers in advance. That's a sort of, if you really think that, you have an interview and you just kind of going to swing it and you just really sort of going, you have a bit of an idea what you're going to say when answering different questions, you are really going to fail. And, I've seen it many, many times. You really need to spend time to prepare your answers, write them down. If it's bullet points or sort of, full sentences is really up to you, whatever works for you. But preparing your answers in advance is one of the key elements that will guarantee you that you are succeeding in online or any interview. And I want to discuss straight away actually three most popular and from my experience, the most difficult interview questions. And let's talk, sort of how to craft the best answer for these sort of, three different questions. So tell me about yourself. What is your weakness or what is your biggest failure, and why do you want to work for us? So let's start with tell me about yourself. And this question, appears all the time. And from my opinion, it should be the easiest one because you are talking about yourself. So you can really choose to talk about anything you want. However, at the same time, it's one of the hardest things because everybody's asking me, well, what do I need to say? What sort of amount of details should be I going into? They also seen my CV. Should I repeat the same information? So actually, the biggest mistake that people make when they are answering this "tell me about yourself" question is rehashing your CV. What I mean by that they actually take the CV and they, in a chronological order, just really tell them everything that, let's say I'm currently a master's student studying economics. I have internship experience in this field, and they kind of go bullet point by bullet point, saying exactly the same things that they put on their CV and resume. Now, this is not interesting. This is boring. That's not what the interviewer is actually wanting to hear. They really want to hear your personal story. They want to hear more about you. They've already seen CV, so why would they actually ask you to, you to tell them the same thing that they can read? So I want to share this 3-step formula for a perfect "tell me about yourself" answer. And this is how it should sound. That when you're answering "tell me about yourself" question, you should always start with who you are, right? And that is sort of should be kind of like almost like the introduction, right? How would you call yourself professionally? Are you a recent graduate, in economics, marketing, business management? Are you the sort of a person who has a few years experience, right? For example, if I was about to give my sort of, 1-sentence introduction, I would be saying that, I'm a career coach with 8 years experience in the field, right? So you want to sort of say who you are, and you also want to sort of in this overview statement show off your strengths and also give a little bit sense of your personality. So yes, we're focusing on professional skills, but it's not a bad idea to actually add a little bit of the personal attributes, because it's sort of, if you are resilient, or you are a goal-getter, or if you are a super organized person, that also could be really relevant to the job. And also everybody who joins the company, they bring their own personality. So you want to mention that as well. Then once you sort of kind of gave this introduction, you need to move on highlighting your skills and abilities. And this is something that a lot of the people kind of fail, that they start sort of listing everything what they're good at, or the sort of all the achievements, or the sort of all the abilities that they feel really proud of. But that's a mistake, right? This is kind of the part I would say you always need to tailor depending on what sort of position you are interviewing for, right? Because if you're going to be highlighting your skills, you only need to focus on highlighting the skills that a company is actually needing, is requiring, is one of the sort of, kind of job description requirements. So if they're looking for great communicators, then you should be highlighting your communication skills, building rapport, negotiating. If they're looking for people who can work well in the team, then of course you need to be sort of highlighting teamwork instead of working independently, right? So make it relevant. That's what is sort of going to be having, a lot of much more impact. And finally, you should finish your answer by adding something that makes you unique, right? And that's what the sort of, I keep focusing a lot on my, the sort of personal branding building when I coach my clients, because you really need to sort of think, okay, what makes you different than everybody else, right? What unique experience you have that others don't, and how this experience could be useful to the company. That's a sort of straight away will put you in a sort of much stronger position when you are interviewing for any position, because you will add, you will mention everything what company is looking for, but on the top of that, you offer something unique, something personal, something different. And even if it's pre-recorded interview, it's still going to be listened by other people. And that's a sort of, that unique point makes another person more interested, and that makes it to stand out from all that sort of, other pile of candidates. So moving on to the kind of next, one of the hardest questions is, what is your greatest weakness? I have to say that kind of what is your greatest weakness is like really old-fashioned way. And from what I've sort of seen in the last couple of years, that this type of question is actually replaced by what is your greatest failure, and asking you to really talk about the time when you failed. So they are kind of very similar, and both of them are sort of focusing on the time when you failed or something that you need to improve. So the sort of the same principles when it comes to answering these questions applies. So first of all, I don't know, if you are making this mistake, or hopefully not, or you've heard other people saying that, one of the sort of greatest weakness, or the sort of times when they fail, people refer to being perfectionists. And this is maybe been a good answer like 15 years ago, but now it's just so used to many times. It's just so boring. And it's almost like, anybody who is like any hiring manager who is hearing another person saying I'm perfectionist, they know that a person can't be bothered to think about their own answer, or they just really are not aware about themselves, and they're just using this answer because they Googled it, and it's a sort of, this is the safest way. And kind of, you are really trying to give a genuine answer. So no way please say you are a perfectionist. Also, I had a client who once told me that he said in the interview that he has no weaknesses. Well, that's a sort of again, I think it's more, could be the sort of, in a sort of different sense, it's more of a cultural issue, that kind of almost saying that you failed or you had a weakness is admitting that you're not good at something. And therefore, if you admit that you're not good at something, how can you get a job, right? So therefore, you really need to be sort of, focusing on saying that you always do the right thing. You always know how to solve the problems, right? So, but this is not the purpose. Companies are asking this question because they really want to know whether you are aware of your weaknesses. Because the person who is aware of the weaknesses, they can actually really work on identifying areas they need to improve, and they will make sure that they're taking a step to improve that. So that's a sort of a really quality that companies want to see. So what I would suggest you to sort of do in order to come up with really good answer to this type of question is that, first of all, start with identifying 3 skills that you are maybe at the moment trying to improve, right? And just be honest with, with yourself, like, what are the areas that you are either working now to sort of get better, or maybe that you need to start working on, improving very soon. And then pick out of these 3 ones, pick one which is the least relevant to the job position you're applying for. And, sort of, in order to actually make your answer sound more positive, you really need to focus on talking of how you are trying to overcome this weakness. Right? How you are sort of making it better. What actions are you taking to improve? That straight away will make your answer, even if you admitted that you're not good at something, that you're actually working to improve. And that sounds, much more positive. The same thing with a failure. If you failed previously in doing something, talk about what you learned from that experience, how you would improve next time if you had to do the same thing, or maybe you already have experience of doing this sort of, improving and changing your sort of actions, and that will do the trick. And the lastly, what I sort of want, the question I want to discuss is, why do you want to work for us? This is a motivational question, and it's 100% true that you are going to be asked this question. First stage interview, second stage interview. This is, every single company wants to know why you want to work for them. And I want to share a few examples to sort of see, does that sound familiar? Would you actually answer this, kind of, why do you want to work for us, similar to these examples? So, the first one, let's say, I want to work with your company because you are an international company with excellent training opportunities. Second example, I've got great team working skills and I'm very persuasive. I work really well in teams and I have a great degree, so I'm a great person for you. So kind of these examples are the worst possible examples that you can give, and let me explain why. The first one is pretty much copy paste from the website. It's, when companies are asking you, why do you want to work for us? It's not a question, what do you know about us? Because if they wanted to test what you know about them, they would ask you, what do you know about us? Right? So the same, you can't use the same answer for both of these 2 questions. With the second example, when you start talking about your own skill set and sort of thinking about adding value to the company, it's much more powerful and it's much better than copying and pasting. But again, you're missing actual question, because it doesn't ask you what value can add to our company, or why do you think you are good sort of choice for us, why we would hire you. right? They, again, will ask that, don't worry. They ask you, why do you want to work for us, right? So again, the answer itself has to be different to these two different questions. And the key thing that I really want you to sort of understand the difference between these two different type of questions, motivational questions, right? Like, why do you want to work for us? Why do you want to do this job? Why you want to work in this industry? And competency or strengths questions. Tell me about the time when you worked in a team. What are your strengths? Give us an example when you led a team. How would you convince a person, right? So there are questions testing about you and your interests, and there are questions that testing about your skill set. So of course, when you're talking about the skill set questions, competency questions, right, when I ask you to give examples or share your, sort of your abilities, everything what you say, you need to be sort of adding value to the company. However, when it comes to motivational questions, it's other way around. You actually need to be thinking what company offers and what can I gain out from that, right? Why would you be happy with that opportunity? So kind of the trick that I always tell everybody to do that in your head, when you are thinking about why do I want to work for this company, when you are trying to answer this question, replace this question with a different question: how working for this company could help you to achieve your goals, what you can benefit from this company, right? That's a sort of, kind of really want to be thinking about what you can get out of this company and how it's going to help your future development, your future career, what type of work you want to do. It has to be focusing about you, not of what you can give to the company. And the two key things that you really need to keep in mind when answering motivational questions. First of all, you need to talk about your own requirements, right? So you need to think of what is important when it comes to choosing a company. Is it taking on early responsibilities? Is it that you really want to work with well-known clients? Is it that you are looking for particular training opportunities? Is it that you are looking for supportive, encouraging working environment, right? You really need to be clear what is important to you, because when you know your own requirements, you can actually select companies based on that and link to that, right? And second point, which is extremely important, is make it unique to the company. I always say, to every single person who is listening to me, that if you can use the same answer, for a question, why do you want to work for us? And you just keep changing company's name and it works, then it's not a good answer. And that's a test that you can always do it. Can I use the same answer? Let's say if you are wanting to work, let's say for JP Morgan, right, international bank, and can I work for Goldman Sachs, another bank? Would I use the same answer? If you can, then your answer is not specific. If it's not specific, it's not good enough. If it's not good enough, it's not going to impress anybody, right? So you need to make very unique to the company. And that's why, if you remember when I was talking about how important it is to actually research the competitors and how important it is to really compare competitors, then you will be, once you do that, you will be able to actually find these unique points about the company. Because you will never know how one or another company is going to be different just looking at that one case. You need to look at the key competitors and compare, and that's what will help you to identify unique points about the company. And if these unique points actually matches your own requirements, then you have a winning motivational answer. So to kind of sum up, there are sort of three areas which are really necessary for you to succeed in online interviews. First of all, when you are thinking about answers and preparing your answers, test yourself and kind of question that question that you're being asked or preparing, right? You should always think about why a particular question is being asked. What is the reason of testing this? What companies want to hear? Because once you know that, then it makes much easier for you to prepare an example, and you will prepare an example which actually ticks all the boxes. And once you do that, then you need to start practicing your answers, right? And when I sort of say practicing, you really need to be sort of, trying to say it out loud, because, it's important what you say, but it's equally important is how you say it. And this is why you need to be looking for feedback, because sitting in front of the mirror and practicing by yourself is good, but you don't know what is going wrong and what is going right. You need to get feedback. And the sort of feedback, it could be from any sort of mentors, career coaches, for people who are involved in hiring, and they really hired people and they know what sort of questions they would prefer. This is type of the feedback you really need to be looking for. Asking for a friend who is actually also failing in interviews and their opinion about your answer is not going to give you really good results, because both of you are failing in interviews. So, you really need to sort of get, a better formed feedback. So that's a sort of kind of my key points in terms of how to succeed in online interviews. And what I kind of want to do now, I really want to introduce my online group coaching program with you guys. If you remember that sort of, surprise that we have for you. So that's kind of one of a part of a surprise. So the sort of, I spent into one-to-one coaching 8 years, and I developed my signature program and signature sort of methodology. So now I decided to put all that in a 3-day online bootcamp that would be sort of really focusing on graduates and helping them to speed up their job search. So how the sort of, my online group coaching works, so that in 3 days, you will have 2-hour sessions, which includes workshop and very interactive Q&A sessions. I limit my group coaching for very small, up to 20 students group, that everybody would have a chance to ask a question. Everybody would have sort of access to my personalized feedback. So that's why I want to keep it really small. Also, there are different signing up options, and one of the options is that you can always add 1 hour of one-to-one session with me. You will receive all the sort of recordings of all the workshops and everything what we do. I, of course, would highly, for anybody who enrolls, suggest to attend. But that's the recording is really good to refresh your memory, remind yourself, and watch the training again. And of course, you would receive all the additional resources, program materials, and all the sort of cheat sheets that I use. So just to sort of very quickly to say that the bootcamp is designed for graduates. That's kind of the area of my expertise. So I really, sort of focusing on determined, ambitious graduates, or graduates to be. So whether you're a recent graduate, 1-2 years, or you are about to graduate, you will really benefit from this bootcamp. And this is sort of for people who really want to work in international companies, who don't have a clue how and where to start the job search, or maybe for people who already started the job search, but they are actually failing and not seeing the results they are hoping for. So we are going to be kind of having, 3 days, as I said, focusing on 3 different topics. So first of all, the day 1 is focusing on creating a targeted job search plan, having that clarity, because based on that, you will need different job search strategies, and we will work to develop your personal brand. In the day 2, we will be translating your personal brand into cover letters and CVs. And the last day, we will be just focusing on interviews. So I'm sure you're going to be receiving an email with all that sort of information and the link, but that's just a sort of kind of, a little bit more of the detailed curriculum here that, as I said, day 1 is all about targeted job search plan, developing personal brand, really discovering your star wow factor, that what makes you unique, and that will ensure that you beat your competition. Then we sort of translate that to your CV, but also where I focus a lot is to really showing you how to decode a job description in order to match yourself for the role. Because recruitment is a matching exercise. Everything what you apply for, you really need to be sort of matching. So I will be sort of showing you how to decode a job description, how to prepare a key-rich and targeted sort of resume. And also we will talk about cover letters. And lastly, we'll do a sort of, job interviews masterclass. We will talk not only about motivational questions, we'll talk about strength-based commercial awareness, competency questions, and we will have this sort of online group to practice that I could hear your answers. I could give you personalized feedback, and that's a sort of, we will finish a 3-day coaching. And the sort of, the boot camp this month is going to be happening next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 2 p.m. British Summer Time. And the sort of the surprise that we have for you that, as a sort of to say thank you for your interest in joining our workshop, we're going to be I'm offering 20% discount if you sort of decide to join. So that's a sort of, special surprise and special sort of, a deal for you guys to save 20% off and actually get that training now and speed up your job search. So this is everything what I wanted to say. And thank you very much for listening. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I'm happy to get any questions from you guys.
So we actually did have one question previously. I'm just going to read it really quick. And
Okay,
then
great.
the first one was, how long should the answers be in an online interview? And is it advisable to give as much information as possible?
Okay, let's start with a sort of, is it advisable to give as much information as possible? Well, I would say the key is always focus on the relevant information. Not always most amount of details is the best thing to do because maybe nobody cares about that, right? So keep it always to the sort of relevant to the question. Shorter is better than longer. People have a very short attention span, so actually grabbing the attention straight away is much better. Now about how long the answer should be. If you're going to be having a pre-recorded interview, they will tell you how much time do you have for, for the actual sort of recording answer. And it depends company by, on company. What I've seen that it varies anything from 90 seconds till 3 minutes. Now, if you have 3 minutes to answer and record your answer, that doesn't mean that you need to use your 3 minutes. I would probably say on average, anything around 2 minutes is well enough to kind of give well-informed answer and actually put your message across. And, if you're actually going to be having this one-to-one conversation, how now I'm having with this sort of Erica, nobody's going to be sitting with a timer and timing your answers. If you're actually giving a really good, interesting answer, if it's a bit longer, nobody will care because you're engaging and people are really interested in listening to you. But I would say anything, less than a minute, less than a minute and a half is too short because you just won't be able to sell yourself.
Thank you so much. Our next question is, what are the portals for job search, which are really looked by employers?
The sort of, I would say it really depends on what position you are applying, you're looking for, right? If we're talking about the sort of graduate sort of, jobs, I would look at target jobs. I would look at Milk Round. They are really focusing on graduate sort of schemes. I would also look for LinkedIn, but LinkedIn is more, I would say, for experienced people. The sort of, they have graduate schemes there, but no, I wouldn't use it too much. I actually would approach the job search in a slightly different way, that I would always focus, and that is sort of what my coaching is about, that you really need to identify the key companies you want to work for, and then keep checking companies' website and contact them and then make these applications, rather than being very passive and wait until somebody will post. Because going to company's website and applying through their own portal is always much more powerful rather than going to sort of, let's say on LinkedIn.
Okay, thank you. Another question is, questions or isolated comments may arise during an interview, which I'm expected to give my opinion on my political or social cultural position on a specific issue. So what is the best way to answer those questions?
I have to say that you are not going to be asked to give your political views on anything. Because it's a very, this very sensitive subject and everybody's entitled to have their own opinions. So nobody should be asking you that. It's like the same thing as people shouldn't be asking you how old are you, or whether you are planning to have children or whether you're planning to get married. That's a sort of, I would say it's a red flag if anybody's asking you for that. So companies definitely not going to ask you that. However, there are certain economical aspects which can influence economy or company's business. For example, Brexit. So nobody would ask you, what do you think about Brexit? Is it a good thing that it happened or a bad thing? But they would ask you, how do you think Brexit is going to influence our business? What opportunities or threats Brexit can cause us? So that's a sort of the same thing could be happening with a sort of, pandemic, with any sort of other independence movements, any war conflicts. Rather than expressing which side you kind of ally with, think of this as a sort of, event and compare with the industries that you're interested in and what sort of impact it will have, negative and positive. These type of questions you will be asked, and that's a sort of, you can prepare your answers. And I wouldn't really go into any details expressing my opinion, because you don't know what other person has, the opinion on, and you kind of don't want to be clashing with an interviewer, because that's really not the time yet.
Right, great answer. The next one is, what if when I research a company that is not, well, that doesn't have a lot of information because it's either a small company or a startup, and then they ask me the question, can you tell us about our company? What is it that you already know about us?
Well, I would sort of say that if you can't find a lot of information about the company, what inspired you to apply for that company in the first place? I mean, why would you? I mean, that's a sort of, always apply to the companies that you actually have some sort of interest. I agree, there are some companies that it's hard to get that information online. I would sort of try then set up informational interviews with people who work in these organizations. So that's a sort of that's why a job search is a strategy. It's not a very passive thing. Whatever pops up, I will apply, right? You can, of course, use, the sort of job adverts, and it's great. But if that matches your goal, if it's within the industry, if it's with the sort of companies you're interested in. But, if you are sort of making your kind of plan and thinking about a variety of companies, you need to connect to people on LinkedIn, ask them questions, what is, what it is, to work for your company, kind of carrying out a little bit of the sort of info, as I call it, informational interviews. The same way, don't forget to check social media, Instagram pages, some companies have YouTube channels. Any of this sort of information could be really helpful for you to get a little bit more information on that.
Perfect. Our next question is coming from Victoria. So what if you start an interview, you have a really bad connection? Is it too bad trying to reschedule it?
I mean, it, obviously that's a sort of something that you never ever want to happen. I would always say, have a plan B. Can you use, if your Wi-Fi stopped working, can you use your mobile data? Kind of find it as sort of a different way. I would also say maybe you could arrange it to a telephone call. Try to sort of, before you just give up and try to reschedule, try these different options, logging into the sort of different broadband, try to the sort of, kind of telephone or any other mediums. And only then, if it doesn't work, ask to reschedule.
Perfect. So we have 2 more questions for today. And then if anyone has any other questions, Evelina will also be conducting Q&A in an Instagram Live tomorrow. So we're going to be adding more information in the chat in a little bit. But the 2 last questions are, so if I'm targeting a company which is inspiring, but I lack the relevant experience, can I ask to become an intern?
Yes, absolutely. I think that's a sort of the best strategy to get into the industry and the companies that you're really interested in, but you lack some sort of experience. Now, when it comes to sort of, changing careers or graduates, when you say, I don't have relevant experience, think about transferable skills, because, you might not have exactly the sort of same experience, but you might have the skills that you developed in your, previous experiences, which can be used in the current company that you are sort of, you want to work for. So even if you're going to ask for internship, demonstrating that you're already having relevant skills, transferable skills that will help you to succeed, is going to really impress a company and will sort of open, kind of the conversation going. I would also say that the strategy to target companies that you're really, passionate about, again, connecting to people, even if they're not looking for, let's say, interns or employers at this particular moment, you can always talk to people and express your interest and say when it's going to sort of, when you're planning to recruit. What does it take you, to succeed in your company? What skills do I need to have? All right, this is my background. What else I need to improve in order to be sort of desirable candidate for you? So that you kind of make that communication happening and you actively follow. And, once they have this opportunity open, they will be, oh, I remember this person that, we talked about, why don't we straight away have a conversation?
Perfect. The next one and the last one is, what are the points to highlight or avoid when you're asked, why did you leave your previous company?
The sort of the number one rule, you can never criticize your previous employer. So whatever your boss, if you left because you didn't like it, or they sort of kind of fired you, or whatever sort of conflict you had, you should never say that. So, don't criticize your boss. Sort of, don't say anything bad. Just you can't do that. In the sort of that, how you want to switch it is focusing on what other opportunities you're looking at now. Is it that you're looking for career advancement? Is it that you want to change industries? Is it that you want more training? Is it that you want to take on more responsibilities, right? And focus, especially if it matches, it has to match the position you're applying for. And that's what you're saying, that I left, or I'm, wanting to leave position because, I feel I want to step into a new role. I want to take on more responsibilities. I want to explore a different market. Right, and I'm particularly interested, in your company for this and this reason. So, you focusing on what you want rather what happened in the past.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Evelina, for answering
No
all of
worries.
those questions. As we just mentioned, if you guys have any other questions, Evelina will be available tomorrow at 4 o'clock CET time as well, Madrid time for those who don't know. And yes, thank you very much again. Evelina, I don't know if you would like to mention anything else before we close.
Well, the sort of, it was absolutely my pleasure. And thank you so much for having me. And I'm really looking forward to seeing, if not everybody, most of you tomorrow at Instagram Live, where can we actually go to the sort of just Q&A session, and I can answer all your questions. And it doesn't have to be about interviews. It can be about cover letters, CVs, job search strategy, anything that is sort of really stopping you from kind of, achieving the sort of job search success that you want. And I mean, the sort of feel free to follow me on Instagram as well. It's career stylist Evelina. I think, I'll be tagged in this sort of post as well from European language jobs. So, you can get more tips as well. And, have a lovely evening, everyone.